How do I use Pinterest as a podcaster? This is a question I get quite often, and we are going to cover it today. This is a question that I get from people who are interested in getting more traffic to their podcast episodes, but maybe have never explored Pinterest as a search engine. These people have heard me speak on summits and in Clubhouse rooms. And as of recently, I've gotten a few people asking about video podcasting and using Pinterest to get more traffic to their podcast that way. So I actually have two examples of very well-known podcasters who use Pinterest in their podcast or to drive traffic to their podcast. And that is what we're going to talk about today. And they use these methods very differently. And these are the two different ways that I actually encourage others to use Pinterest to drive traffic to their podcasts as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're a podcaster or if you're a Pinterest manager working for a podcaster and you're wondering how can we get more traffic to our podcast episodes, then this video is definitely for you. Hey, I'm Heather Farris. I run a Pinterest marketing agency and education company, and I'm coming to you today from a big chair. I was sick of sitting in my office chair, so I dragged this one over here, and it's so much more comfy, and I may never move it. I've been doing Pinterest marketing for 4.5 years. I have worked with hundreds of different clients. I have hundreds of students in my various courses, and now a growing community here on YouTube that is looking to me to learn about Pinterest. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. This community is definitely for you. In the meantime, let's chat about using Pinterest for podcasting. So, generally speaking, podcasters rely heavily on subscribers and notifications to actually get listeners. And they also rely heavily on either their email list in some cases or social media to really bring awareness to their podcast. I find podcast players to be very hard to actually search on. So it's really kind of limited when I go on podcast platforms to actually look for specific things to find a wide variety of episodes to listen to. And with the growing popularity of audio, especially brought to focus in 2020 into 2021 with Clubhouse, there's more focus on getting more ears on your podcast episodes. So Pinterest, being the search engine that it is a great way to get those eyeballs onto your content and those ears into your podcast. So what we want to do is actually talk about long form content first, because Pinterest users are inherently trained to click on and land on longer form content. Now we are breaking into the shoppable pin and the using Pinterest for shopping situation. And with the rise of that, some people are asking themselves if they even have space on Pinterest at all. And the answer to that is yes. Even as a podcaster, even if you've never used Pinterest and you don't have anything to buy, yes, there's still space for you. That is where long form and educational content really comes in. And that's pretty much the purpose of your podcast, is to connect and educate and inform your audience on whatever topic you're talking about this week. Now, I personally think that podcasts do better when they produce more than just an outline for their show notes, but that is also an option. So you would use the same strategies that I teach in my Pinterest marketing videos, like in the Pinterest Marketing for Beginners playlist or the Pinterest Marketing Strategy playlist. You would use those same strategies, so keywords, an image strategy, automation strategy, all of those things. And then you would really focus on sending traffic to your blog post, which houses your weekly podcast episode show notes. So if you are a podcaster and you're not utilizing your own website for your show notes, you're really losing out on traffic that could be yours and not someone else's, especially if you're only sending them to the Apple show notes page that is produced by a platform like Lisbon. I think it's really, really crucial when you're building your podcast out and you're publishing your show notes to actually utilize your own website for those show notes. Whether you have anything else on your website at all, maybe it's just a 2-pager, you have a blog page and you have a homepage, maybe about page, but really housing those show notes on your website. So let's talk about the differences in show notes and the differences in the experts who have podcasts, who chances are you've listened to and heard of. Amy Porterfield and Jenna Kutcher, both very large podcasters, and both of them utilize their website to actually get more people to their podcast episodes. I prefer long form content in the form of an actual breakdown, because we all have different people in our audience they have different learning styles. Some people are going to come to you and prefer to read your content, whereas some people will come to you and they prefer to listen. I'm definitely more of a listen until it comes to certain things, and then I really need to see it. I utilize various forms of media to get my information. When I'm looking for how-tos, I watch videos. When I'm looking to absorb content that isn't really distracting for me, I'll listen to things in my earbuds and just leave my phone on the desk. And when I just want peace and quiet, I'll read. So you have to think about your audience and who you're attracting and where they're coming from. This is we're getting deep. We're getting into the weeds of customer journey and all of that. Let's get back to the topic at hand. Long form content. So more than just an outline of your show notes. So here we go. So Jenna Kutcher writes full blog posts that go with her podcast episodes. She probably doesn't write them, her team writes them. But nonetheless, you can easily do this with transcription services like Rev, Convertit, or Otter.ai, which you get 600 free minutes of, not an ad, but 600 free minutes of conversion a month. So if your podcast episodes are 20 minutes and you publish 4 a month, then you have enough with Otter.ai to convert your audio into text. So as you're recording your podcast episode, you could just have the app open on your phone. It would also record it and then convert it to text for you. And then you can give that to a team member and they can convert it into long form content. So Jenna does this, and she embeds her podcast player, and she embeds all of the links talked about into the podcast, the show notes. So it's so much more than just show notes at that point, right? And it is more work. That is a con. But a pro is it's easier to convert readers to podcast listeners if they have something high value and actionable to read and input. So another pro of long form blog content as podcast show notes is actually increasing your email list subscribers. More people are actually likely to take action and join your email list, in my opinion. I don't know if this is actually true, but in my opinion, if they are a reader and they do come to your your website cold from Pinterest, land on a podcast episode, read it, or alternatively skim it and then listen to it on the podcast player, they're more likely to take action than just landing on show notes cold from Pinterest and having no idea what they're looking at. It would be confusing. Also, you can get more listeners and audience members because long form content is SEO friendly. When you're feeding the Google algorithm and you are giving Google more to work with as far as your content goes, your podcast episode, they can then index that, and when people are searching for your topic at hand, podcast players are not easily searchable, but if people are searching for that on Google or YouTube, then chances are you may come up in those searches instead. Obviously, it only come up on YouTube if you've published a video about it. So if you do a video podcast, this is where it pertains to you. But if they're searching on Google for mindset tips for finances, you're more likely to come up in that search if you do long form content. So again, the con for long form content is it takes longer and it's a little bit more work. Short form summaries in show note format placed on your website as a blog post with your podcast player embedded yet again. All the links that are appropriate for the podcast episode are embedded, as well as whatever email list you're promoting and your call to action. So whether it's a guest or if it's just you promoting it, doesn't matter. All of the information is there in short form. Amy Porterfield does this. She has her gigantic podcast, which she probably doesn't even need to promote much on her own anymore. She does short form summaries in the format of a blog post, publishes that on her website, and then pushes that out to Pinterest. So while it may not be search engine friendly, like super search engine friendly, you can still utilize keywords, give a short synopsis, maybe 300 to 500 words, and then do your summary of like bullet points of what you talked about, perhaps timestamps of where they can find that information in the podcast episode, your call to action, and your email list subscription. So one of the downsides of this, and I might have mentioned this already, is I don't feel like shorter form summaries convert to podcast listens as well. At least from a user standpoint, I know I haven't converted to podcast listens when I've landed on short form blog posts promoted on Pinterest that lead me to a podcast episode, because I land on it cold expecting to learn how to do the thing they're promising on their pin. And it's just a summary, and then I have to listen, but I'm not invested in them yet. So you really have to get podcast listeners invested before they're going to give you their ears. So just thinking about it from that standpoint of like, this is a con of short form content from Pinterest. That's why I think even adding in a 300 to 500 word summary as to, giving them something in that summary as to what they're going to get in the podcast episode probably help them convert better. All right, so how do you go about doing this? How do you go about getting more ears into your podcast episodes or more eyeballs onto your podcast show notes from Pinterest? But first of all, you really have to have a business account. So set up your Pinterest for Business account if you haven't claimed it already. It's a rookie mistake if you haven't done that, but it takes 5 minutes to do. Once you have that, I want you to claim your domain, which is your website, and then you're gonna go through the strategies. So if you need help with this of like, what do I do on Pinterest? What do I need to focus on? Definitely go and watch my 5 pillars for Pinterest strategy video, and that will inform you on what you actually need to do and focus on Pinterest. But ultimately, you need a profile, you need your boards, you're gonna create Pinterest images, and you're gonna drive those to your show notes, which live on your website. Remember, we want to send them to our own websites. We want to capture that traffic so we own it and ultimately get them to our email list. This is another really great strategy if you're going to do any retargeting ads, anyone who's visited your website. If you want to turn on any sort of display advertising, you have to show traffic on your own site. Same with sponsorships and things like that. So you really need to own the traffic and send it to your own website. And then make sure that you have a strong call to action throughout your content and on your website. You really need to tell people what they need to do next. Do you want them to subscribe to your podcast? Make that easy to do. Do you want them to join your email list? Make that easy to do. Help them to share your content easily. If they find value in your content, they will share it with their friends if they know that you want them to share it. So make sure you know, like, hey, screenshot this podcast episode and plug it into your Instagram stories and tag me and share it with your friends, that sort of thing. I think that is so powerful for social proof and also getting more ears into your podcast through the content you're already creating. I love a good repurposing strategy. And unfortunately, a lot of podcasters who are wanting to use Pinterest are not repurposing very well. They're really relying on the podcast platform to get them more traffic. And that's just like, at the end of the day, long-term strategy, it's not going to work forever. Unless you're just a really big name and you have a lot of really high value, really popular guests that are coming on to your show and sharing it with their communities. But if you're a smaller podcaster and you are really just trying to get your podcast off the ground, I think using Pinterest, as long as your people are on Pinterest, might be a good suitability, situation. So figuring out if your people are on Pinterest or not, I want you to head on over to the platform, plug in a few of your podcast episodes whatever you talk about, plug it into the search bar and see what comes up. There may not be other podcasts that come up, but there will be other creators if your content is on the platform. All of Jenna Kutcher and Amy Porterfield's type of content, and they do a lot of B2B, their content is on Pinterest. Their audience is on Pinterest. So just knowing what ultimately you want Pinterest to do for your business and how it serves you in the long run is really going to help you to inform your strategy overall and get more ears on your stuff. That's really it for this episode. This is very much not a how to publish and promote your content on Pinterest for podcasters, but really just changing your mindset around how you could utilize this platform for your business. So if you're wanting to use Pinterest for your podcast in 2021 and beyond, make sure you head down to the description of this video, grab my Pinterest strategy guide. It covers those 5 pillars that you need in your Pinterest strategy, and really goes deeper into those and helping you to craft them. Totally free. Grab that. And if you want more marketing tips as far as actually getting traffic using Pinterest, head on over and watch our Pinterest playlist, Pinterest marketing playlist. And that's it for this episode, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up. Give me a comment if you'd like to add to this discussion, and I'll see you next time.